Okay, Be'ezras Hashem. I hope everybody's doing well. We are Daf Lamed Hey, right? 35, but we left off in the middle of the page. I would say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 15 lines from the bottom with the words Ki Asa. I want to point out, it's one of those Gemaras that's kedai to remember. We learned in the beginning of the page that the house of Rebbe had their daughters rip out their hymen, and because we learned the scientific medical knowledge that the Gemara is trying to tell you that a woman who's a virgin cannot conceive after the first bia, after the first relations. So in the Gemara it says that the house of Rebbe, what did they do? The Omar Rabbi Yitzchak Kol Me'acha Shel Beis Rebbe Tamar Shemam. Every person, only those girls, those frum girls of the house of Rebbe who would rip out their hymen, they would call them Tamar, because they did a Maaseh Tamar, which means that Tamar did that. I found that to be fascinating, that they wanted the relations with the husband the first time to be something capable of conceiving. So I thought that was one of those Gemaras that you could remember as, a little trivia. The other point I want to bring out is that I'm just going to mention this as a side. We learned before that the problem why God gave Er and Oinan a premature death is because they didn't do Bia the right way. They did it Shaloi Kedarka, not through the front, through the back. And so it seems that doing it that way is wrong, but Tosfos deals with the other Gemaras that seem to permit such a thing, even though there's hashchasas zera. There's obviously the seed is not going to produce anything. So the thing what Tosfos says is that it's only Maaseh erva oinam if you're doing it rogel lasses came tomid, as I point out. If you do it continuously. Aval Bekroi Be'alma, he says once in a while, Shari. That's what he says. And this is a Kedaita, Tosfos dealing with all these things that you would think Torah does not deal with. It does deal with it. Now we're up to over here. Ki Asa. The Gemara says Ki Asa Raven. Let me see if I can get this. Good. Ki Asa Raven Amar Rabbi Yochanan. When Raven came from Eretz Yisrael, he said, and he came to Bavel, and he said in the name of his teacher, Rabbi Yochanan, another medical fact, that Kol she'shohasa achar bala eseshanim, any person that lost her husband, a woman that lost her husband or got divorced from a husband and waited after her husband 10 years, she wasn't married to anybody, venisis, and then gets married, shuv eni yalada, she can never give birth. She can never give birth. So let's say she got divorced at age 20, and for 10 years she didn't get married to anybody. She will not have a child anymore. Amar Rav Nachman qualified this teaching. Loishon, it was not taught ela she'ein dat li naseh. If in her mind she had no intentions of getting remarried again, she gave up on marriage. Aval, but daita li naseh. But if she had intention to get married, Miss Aberesh, then she will become pregnant. And the Gemara brings like a little story to prove that point, that if a woman, even though it's more than 10 years since she had a husband, but if she in her mind wanted to get married, she could still get married, but she could still have children. The Gemara says that the daughter of Rav Chizda was married to this person called Rami Bar Chama, and that person died. And she waited 10 years, and then she married Rava, and they had children. So Rava told his wife, and after they had children, Amalei Rava labas Rav Chizda. Rava said to his wife, the daughter of Rav Chizda, Komeranane Rabbanan Abasrich. Everybody's murmuring about you, that you must have had relations with somebody else after the death of your previous husband. It's been 10 years ago, Rami Bar Chama. Because otherwise, how would you be able to have children with me if you weren't married for 10 years? So she told him, Ano datai Allah havai. I had a crush on you. I was thinking about one day I would be able to marry you. And And the Gemara says that that actually it's a funny story that when she was a little girl, she was sitting on her father's lap, and Rami Bachama and Rava were both in front of Rav Chizda. And Rav Chizda asked his daughter, "Who would you like to marry?" And she said, "Both of them." Right? The Omer Rav Chizda, Tervayu Kabi'in. I want to marry both of them. And that's what happened. She married both of them. So she always had a crush on Rava or something like that. She wanted to marry him, so therefore she could have kids. You find this in by the way, this Yisoid, I think in Rus, where even though it was 10 years, if you hope to have children, there's potential there. That's this discussion in Rus. Anyway, the Gemara says, Hahi da'aseh lakamed Rav Yosef. There was this woman who came to Rav Yosef. Amr Loi, she said to Rav Yosef, Rebbe, Ani shahisi acha bali eseshanim. I did not have a husband for 10 years, and then I remarried, v'yoladati, and I gave birth. So basically, she was saying that whatever the Chachamim said is false. Amalei, so Rav Yosef said, Biti, my daughter, al toitzi las al divrei Chachamim. Don't spread defamation against the words of the Chachamim. Chachamim said that if you wait 10 years and you didn't have children, and you weren't married to anybody, you're not going to have children. Basically, he was trying to get her to admit that she had znus during those 10 years. And finally, she did admit it. Amarle, she said, "L'goy nivalti." Actually, I had relations with a goy. So that ends that sugya of the Gemara of the other scientific fact that the Gemara discusses over here, whether a woman whose husband, she got divorced, or her husband died, if 10 years pass, can she still have children? Now Gemara goes, we're up to Daf Lamed Dalet on the base, about 6 lines from the bottom. The Gemara says, now we know that the Gemara says like this: a woman that loses her husband, or she got divorced, or she had znus, a girl who was not married had znus, before she remarry again, she has to wait 3 months, because you need to know where the child comes from. Who is the father of the child? And it gets confusing if she gets married right away and she has a child within 6 to 9 months. You don't know, is it the child of the second husband or the first husband or the person she had znus with? So the Gemara says, Amar Shmuel, there's 2 lashonos of what Shmuel said. Bekulan, all women, all women, no matter what, after relations with one person, they have to wait 3 months before they can remarry and have another husband. Chutz, the exception is Megiyoris umushkureres ketana. The giyoris or shechreres, a giyoris, a woman who becomes a ger, right? And she's a katana, or a woman who is a shifcha and she became freed. So then, even if she had znus, we assume that every goy has znus. Even if she had znus, she wouldn't be able to have a child because she's underage. So therefore, she doesn't have to wait 3 months. A gyoris that becomes a Jew and she's under 12, she could right away marry a Jew. Avo, so we precisely point out in Shmuel's words, Avo, but what would be the case? Ketana bas Yisrael, a ketana, let's say a girl under bas mitzvah, and she's married to a Jew, right? A kedushin d'rabbanan. Then when she leaves her husband, it's only a goy doesn't have to wait. A goy turning into a ger, she doesn't have to wait. But a ketana bas Yisrael, a ketana under 12-year-old, when she leaves her husband, she does have to wait 3 months. So the Gemara says, Ubaman, what's this Ubamai? What is the case talking about? A ketana, how does she get married at all? If it's talking about her brother, or let's say it was a kedushin d'rabbanan, right? And we know that if we mentioned this many times before, that the mother and brother can marry her off. In case there's no father, they can marry her off to somebody. So how does she leave such a marriage? If she left the marriage by refusing to live with the guy, so in that case, Shmuel says the loy boya. Shmuel already told us that she does not have to wait 3 months. So the beget, and if it turns out she was married to this guy, and he happened to give her a get, right? She could have walked out with Miyun, but he gave her a get. Ha'amar Shmuel chadazima. Shmuel told you already that in this scenario, she does have to wait 3 months. To Amar Shmuel, Miyun a boy, it the katana that does Miyun, a refusal, ain't it she doesn't have to wait 3 months to get married. Nasan a get, but if the husband gave her a get, she does need to wait 3 months. And the reason why, if she got a get, is because people will confuse that if a katana doesn't have to wait 3 months after getting a get, so a gedola doesn't also have to wait 3 months after getting a get. So that's why if he gave her a get, he didn't have to, but he gave her a get anyway, she must wait 3 months. But mian, the possibility that you could walk out of a marriage without a get only exists by a katana. So therefore, there's no real gezerah. Therefore, if she just walked out by mi'un, she doesn't have to wait 3 months. So what is the chiddush of Shmuel, or the way the Gemara is medayik in Shmuel, that a katana bas Yisrael tzrich lahamtin chiyuba chadashin? What scenario is a new novelty, a halacha, that we know a katana bas Yisrael has to wait 3 months? Ella, it must be talking about bisnus. She had relations with somebody out of wedlock, and therefore, and we know, everybody knows she had an affair with this person. So then she has to wait 3 months. She wasn't even married. The Gazur Rabbanan Ketana, we go to Lamed Hey Amar Aleph. The Gazur Rabbanan Ketana Mishum Gedoyla. The Rabbanan were Geyser a Ketana Mishum Gedoyla. That means that if we allow a Ketana to, even though she can never have a child, so why should she wait 3 months? Because maybe a Gedoyla that does nus, let's say an older woman had an affair with somebody, she wasn't married, out of wedlock, so then we make her wait 3 months, so we should know who's the father of the child. Is the child born through a normal marriage, or the child was born out of wedlock? So they were born a geyser katana otra gedola. But the Gemara Rashi is going to explain, and the Gemara is going to explain later on. By a giyores, who's a katana, we don't make a gezerah that a katana should have to wait 3 months, because for a little girl to become a converted Jew, under 12, that's loy shchicha, that's not common. Certainly a regular ger, let's say a 17-year-old goy that becomes a yid, that girl has to wait 3 months before marrying a Jew. But a katana, if she's under 12, since it's not so common, she should become a Jew. So if she does become a Jew, let's say an 11-year-old, she doesn't have to wait 3 months. So the Gemara asks the question, Umi gazrina katana mishum gedola. Are we ever making a gzeira a katana because of a gedola? Do we ever geyser that we confuse the leniencies that you apply for a girl under bas mitzvah? Maybe you'll come to confuse her with a girl over bas mitzvah. But now we learned in our Mishnah, im hoyot katanas she'enu ru'uyas leilid machzirun oisim yad. Remember our Mishnah, we're talking about two brothers with two sisters. They swapped wives at the day of the wedding. So, and the Mishnah says that if we found out of the mistake, our Mishnah was dealing with a mistake, and then if there were girls under bas mitzvah, they can go back to their original husband that was meant for them, the original brother that was meant for them. So we see in our Mishnah that a katana does not have to wait 3 months. How could Shmuel argue against our Mishnah? And for the Gemara, Amar Rabbi Yehuda, Amarav, our Mishnah was a strange story that occurred only once, and therefore they allowed this leniency. So Gemara says, what do you mean? Michlal dahabai? Would you say that our Mishnah is talking about an exact occurrence, that there were two brothers and there were two sisters, and this is what happened? If that's the case, always a Mishnah would start off, Ma'aseh Shahaya, there was this story, but our Mishnah does not say that. Our Mishnah just gives you a case. Answers the Gemara, the Mishnah, yes, is a made-up case, of course, but it's a made-up case that could rarely ever occur. It's like so at the end of the bell curve, at the extreme ends. It can never happen, basically. So therefore, it's a loy shchiach case. Our Mishnah says if that case would ever happen of a wife swap at the day of the wedding, then if they're katanas, they can get married. They can return to their husbands right away. So basically, the first lashon said that a katana, Jewish katana, right? She has nus out of wedlock. Let's say an 11-year-old has nus. She has to wait 3 months before she can get married. Lishna Achrina, another version, Amarle Amar Shmuel. Shmuel said, Kulan Tzrichen Lahamtin Shloisha Chadashim. They all have to wait 3 months. Chutz me Gioris Mishkrachas Gedoyla, except the Gioris or a Gioris Gedoyla doesn't have to wait. Right? And Huadina Katana doesn't have to wait. No, even a Gioris, let's say a 17-year-old Goyish girl that becomes a Gioris, she doesn't have to wait 3 months. Only a Jewish girl has to wait 3 months, and we medayik from it, Ava Katana Bas Yisrael, but even a Katana that's a Jewish girl, 11-year-old girl, she never has to wait 3 months. So just the opposite of what we said before. We said before a Katana does have to wait 3 months. Here, she doesn't have to wait 3 months. B'mai, what kind of a Katana are we talking about? If she was married to somebody, and she walked out of the marriage, Shmuel already said it one time, that she doesn't need to wait 3 months. Beget, if it's a Katana that was married to a person and the person gave her a get, in that case, Shmuel said she would need a get. Shmuel said, a Katana that was in a marriage, and she just walked out of the marriage, she doesn't have to wait 3 months because you'll never confuse it with a gadol walking out of marriage. That doesn't exist. So a Katana doesn't have to wait the 3 months. Not-son-law get, but if the husband gave her a get, she does have to wait 3 months, as we explained before, because people, even though she couldn't have had a child with the previous husband, so there's no reason to wait 3 months. But you might think that a gedola that gets a get doesn't either have to wait 3 months. That's why even the katana that gets a get, she has to wait 3 months. So what are we talking about over here? That Shmuel said, according to this version, that a katana does not have to wait 3 months. What are we talking about over here? So answers the Gemara a fascinating thing. Ela b'znus. We're talking about a katana, 11-year-old, 10-year-old that did znus, adultery, and she doesn't have to wait 3 months. Why? Because uznus b'katana lo shchiach, for a katan to do znus, that's not common. And therefore, it's such an uncommon case, she doesn't have to wait 3 months. Obviously, a gedola that did znus, of course, she could potentially have become pregnant with that. And therefore, she does have to wait 3 months. A Jewish katana does not have to wait 3 months, according to this version of Shmuel. Now, the Gemara says, Gioris u'mishuchreres t'shchicha beis nus ligzar. Why don't we say that a gioris and by every goyim there's a lot of znus going around, by a gedola, and there's a lot of znus, we should make a gzeira that they should have to wait 3 months, even a katana, even a gedola. Why do we say that no, they don't have to wait 3 months? So why did Shmuel say chutz that they even a good chutz migioris gedola doesn't have to wait 3 months? Why not? There's a lot of znus going around. Maybe the child will be born from the person she had znus with as a goy, right? You have to know who's the father of the child. Is it a goy when she was a goy, or after she became a converted Jew? Answers the Gemara. Shmuel said his opinion. Who the Amek Rabbi Yossi? He holds like Rabbi Yossi. The Tanya we learned in a brisa, and Rabbi Yossi is going to hold that a woman that knowing that she's going to become a gioris, she already, even if she had znus, she makes sure she doesn't become pregnant. And therefore, even a gedola knows in her mind that she's not going to become pregnant. A gioris, v'hashvuya, somebody in jail, a girl that's in jail, v'hashifcha, a maid, sheniftu that were redeemed, v'nishizgairu that became a ger, v'nishtacharu that became free, they have to wait 3 months. Divrei Rabbi Yehuda. So says Rabbi Yehuda. So that's what we would think, that if you become a Jew, you have to wait 3 months. There's a remiz for that in the Torah. After we left Mitzrayim, we waited 3 months, so to speak, to Kabbalah Torah. But that's because we were Gioris, became Jewish, we were redeemed, we became free. But Rabbi Yossi says, no, matili oris linosum yad. A gioris that becomes a gedola and she's permitted to get married right away. She can marry a Jew the day she becomes converted. Amar Rabba, my time with Rabbi Yossi. What is the reason of Rabbi Yossi? Answers the Gemara, Kesova isha mezama mishameshes b'moich kedei shloi tisava. When she does nus, she uses a sponge that blocks her from becoming pregnant. or it sucks out, according to Rashi, it sucks out the sperm, and therefore she doesn't become pregnant. She's careful to do that. Amalei Abaye, so Abaye said, Bishlama, that all makes sense. Gioris, she knows she's becoming a ger, so she knows it's going to be a problem if she's pregnant. So she's careful. If she did znus as a guy, she makes sure she doesn't become pregnant. Why? To determine which is going to be a Jewish child, the father is going to be a Jew, or the father is not a Jew. So she's careful not to become pregnant. If someone is a maid, or she was in jail, and she knows that any day she's going to become free. The Shamim Mimarai, they heard from their wardens or their masters, and that they're going to be free in a couple of days. So therefore, if they do znus, they're careful not to do znus, not to become pregnant. But there's another way for a shifcha to become free as a total surprise. If you knock out her teeth or eye, so this comes as a shock. So therefore, she's not careful when she does nus not to become pregnant. So how could such a lady whose teeth and eye was knocked out and she became free, how is she allowed to marry right away? Maybe she became pregnant while she did nus when she was a maid. And that's the Gemara's question. How is that possible that she knew that she was going to go free? She didn't know she was going to go free, so therefore she wasn't careful not to become pregnant. So even according to Rabbi Yossi, you have to wait 3 months. Would you say in that case, called the Memela Moida Rabbi Yossi, if it came as a sudden shock, Rabbi Yossi would agree that you goes free, that the woman goes, that the woman doesn't have to wait, that has to wait 3 months. In that case, if it came as a shock, she would have to wait 3 months. But now we learned in the Mishnah, and here's the point. Hanusa, somebody who was raped, umafuta, somebody who was seduced, a regular Jewish girl, they have to wait 3 months before they can get married. Divra Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda, mater li ores v'dinosam yad. Rabbi Yehuda gives permission for these girls, even though they were raped, to get married right away. Now, Anusa is a raped woman, and yet Rabbi Yossi still doesn't require you have to wait 3 months. She's not careful when she had relations, and perhaps she became pregnant. So why does Rabbi Yossi allow this girl to get married right away? Ella Omar Abaya says, Isha mizano mishapechas. When an Isha, nobody wants to become pregnant, especially if she's having an illicit relation. So therefore, a woman who does nus, mishapeches, will turn herself over somehow and force the zera out of her. Shaloitis aber, so she wouldn't become pregnant. So therefore, Rabbi Yossi says, if we know that the psychology of her is not to become pregnant. So therefore, that all those women, Gedolos, we allow them to get married right away, except a Jewish girl, Gedola. And there we need to know, Rashi explains, what about a Jewish girl? So Rashi says, because if you allow a Jewish girl, Gedola, to walk out without waiting 3 months, because you assume she didn't become pregnant, people will say, and Nesuin, people who, even if she's married, she doesn't have to wait 3 months. So that's why a Jewish girl always has to wait 3 months if she's a Gedola. Why does Rabbi Yehuda hold that they do have to wait 3 months? Maybe she can turn around and force the zera out of her, great. And she did become pregnant. That's why he holds you have to wait 3 months. In the Mishnah, it says, by the women that got swapped, the Mishnah says that once they re-swap and they become back to their husbands, they're not permitted to eat truma. So it means like this. The Gemara says, it's mashma from the Mishnah that only if the wife is a kohen, the kohenes, and the husband is a kohen, she can't eat truma. What does that mean? Kohenes in Yisraelis life. That means this didn't only applies by a kohen, a woman kohen, kohanos, but a Jewish woman who married a kohen would be permitted to eat truma. We know that a woman who's mizana, even if it's a mistake, if her husband's a kohen, she can't go back to him, and she can't eat truma. So the Gemara says, Amy, you have to read it like this. Im hoya nishei kahanim. If these are women who are married to kahanim, they can't go back to their husband and they can't eat truma. Because a woman that only a Yisraelis, a woman that's married to a Yisrael, if it's a mistake, she can go back to her husband. A kohen, they can't go back. Nishei koyim ein, nishei Yisraelim loy. Wait a second. Even a Jewish woman that had this nus mistake, and what happens? She would be permitted to forever to eat truma. For example, you have a Yisrael married to a Jewish woman, right? And they had this switch, and then she came back to her husband, and then her husband died. Let's say she was a daughter of a kohen. She goes back to her father's house. Would she be permitted, after having this znus bia in her, would she permitted to go back to her father's house now that her husband died to eat the truma? That's not true. Rav Sheshes taught this teaching. He enlightened our eyes that it's a Mishnah. An Eish Yisrael that got raped, a wife, a Jewish lady that got raped, right? And therefore, let's say she's a Kohenes. Her father is a Kohen, and she comes from a family. She happened to marry Yisrael. Even after this event, she's permitted to go back to her husband. When her husband dies and she goes back to her father's house, pesula lekahuna. She's not permitted to eat. She's not permitted to eat truma. So how could you learn? So that the Gemara's kasha is, how could the Mishnah say it's only if she's a kohenes she's not permitted to eat truma? Even if she was married to a Yisrael, she's not permitted to eat truma. Rava hachikama. This is how you're supposed to read the Mishnah, exactly the way you think. Im hoya kohanos nesuas liyisrael. If they are kohanes, who's the woman who comes from a family of kahana married to a Jew, nifsalum in a truma de beinashaya. After this event, if her husband dies, because she had a znus, a wife swap, and she had a be a znus, therefore, when she goes back to her family's house, she can never eat truma again. And this is all darshan from Psukim. Hadron Allah Abba Achem. We go to the next Mishnah, and we go to Lamed Hey Amud Beis. We know, just to recap, that part of the event is chalitza. Chalitza means that the wife, the woman, takes off the yavam shoe and spits in it. Now, we know that if she has a child, then she doesn't fall to Yibam Chalitza, right? She has a child. And the ones that do Chalitza on Yibam are brothers from the father. Once a man does Chalitza on a woman, right? This is a very important point. Once a man does Chalitza on a woman, he can never marry her sister. Just like when you divorce a woman, you can't marry the sister. So even though Chalitza is not technically you were married to her, Chazal said that if you do chalitza on a woman, you can't marry her relative, which is her sister, and she can't marry your relative. Well, she's not going to marry your brother from your father, but she could potentially marry your brother from your mother. Because she got the chalitza, she can't marry your relative as well. So that's chalitza. And just like one more similarity between chalitza and gittin is just like when you give a divorce to a woman, she cannot marry a kohen. Even a chalitza to a woman also passes her to a kohen. So our Mishnah is talking about a chalitza by accident or something messed up over here. Someone gives chalitza to his yavama. I'm always questioning what this chachoylitz liyavimtoy. It's not that the yavam gives chalitza to the yavama. It's actually the yavama picks off the shoe of the yavam. But anyway, it's written this way: chachoylitz liyavimtoy. Guy gives chalitza to his yavama. The nimseis mu'uberes, and we find out she's pregnant. Wait a second, if she's pregnant, perhaps she's going to have a child, and the chalitza, you didn't even have to give chalitza. She wasn't falling to yibam, right? Because if she gives birth, turns out the dead husband, her dead former husband had a child, and she was not supposed to fall to yibam. So the older, and she gave birth. Bisman shavlod shel kiyama. If the child survives, it's a normal child. So then the chalitza was worthless. You didn't have to give chalitza. Hu muta b'kroivasah. He's permitted to marry her relatives, like her sister. We discount the chalitza. V'hi mutaras b'kroivam, and she's permitted to marry his relatives. V'loi p'salel min kahuna, and she's permitted to marry a kohen because the chalitza is discounted. But ein havolad shel kayama. Now here the vlad didn't survive. So then turns out maybe she did require a chalitza. So we're going to learn something in the Gemara that's a machlekes in the Gemara, but hold off this point. So we know that she was supposed to come to chalitza because she gave birth to a stillborn. So it turns out he gave chalitza to her. Who asur b'krayvasal? He's prohibited in her relatives. He asur b'krayvav. She's prohibited in his relatives. Upsalam in a kahuna, and she's pasul from a kahuna. Presumably, and I'm saying presumably because she got a chalitza already. Hakoinis es yevimtoi, someone who marries his yavama, she did bia with her, right? And let's say the day that his brother died, he already took her as a wife. The nimtza mubaris, and then let's say a month later, she's getting big at the belly. So it must be that she must have been pregnant from the previous brother, from her dead husband. We found out she's pregnant. The older, she gave birth. So again, bisman shavlat shel kiyama, if it's a child, a normal child, turns out the brother that did yibam actually was mezana with an eishes ach, shloi b'mkay mitzvah. Yoitzi has to give her a get right away. The chayovim b'karban, he has to bring the karban chatas if it was a mistake. He did a aveira. V'im ein havlat shel kiyama. If the Vlad did not survive, so it turns out the Yibam was okay, that she now falls to Yibam because the previous husband didn't leave over a child. Yekayim, you could keep this woman as your wife. Let's say, and this is the way you have to understand it, let's say he waited 2 months after. Now, a woman shows that she's pregnant after 3 months. Some women can show their pregnancy after 4 months. Certain women, you can't tell it until after 4 months. Therefore, this guy took this woman 2 months after the previous husband died. And now 2.5 months later, she sees she's pregnant. She sees that she's pregnant. And now you have a suffix. Who is the father of this child? Safed ben Tisha Larishan. Is it the 9-month-old child of the first husband, or Safed ben Shiva La'acharin, or maybe it's a 7-month baby from the second husband. So you don't know who's the father of the child. Which brother is it? So Yaitzi, he has to divorce her because perhaps he wasn't supposed to be miyabim. Perhaps the dead person that died actually left over this child. Vlad kosher, the Vlad is kosher no matter what, because if it's the first husband, that's kosher. If it's the second husband, he was allowed to do yibam. But the chayavim ba'ashim tali, he has to bring an ashim tali, which is a type of carbon if you don't know if you did an avera. So the Gemara says, and here he doesn't know, you'll never know whose child it is. Now here comes a fundamental machlokes. Itma we learned. Someone gives chalitza knowing that the woman is pregnant. So he saw that the dead husband left over a pregnant wife. Let's say she's 2 months or 3 months into her pregnancy, and he gave a chalitza. V'hepila, and it turns out she miscarried, and therefore the chalitza, was it a good chalitza or not? Rabbi Yochanan says, "Ein etzricha chalitza menachan." She doesn't need a new chalitza from any of the brothers, because the chalitza you gave while she's a muberes turned out to be the right thing to do. Rab Shlokish Omer, no, tzricha chalitza menachan. Rab Shlokish, and this is the halacha, she would require a new chalitza, even though it turns out that she miscarried. Still, she would need a brand new chalitza, and we're going to have to understand how to read the Mishnah according to Rabbi Shlokish. That is called a good chalitza. When he does relations, even though she's pregnant, that's a good yibam. Because he holds chalitza mu'barish loy shma chalitza. The chalitza that you did when she's pregnant, that wasn't kosher. Ubias mu'barish, and if you had relations with her while she's pregnant, loy shma bia, that's not called relations. And you have to redo the bia to make yavam. Even though it turns out she miscarried and you did bia once, you have to redo it again. But my komipalgi, what are they arguing about? Either it's out of a pasuk or it's a logical. I would tell you it's logical. Their opinions are logical. Rabbi Yochanan said, holds like this: you gave a chalitza while she's pregnant. In Yove Elio, if Elio will come, the Yoiman will say to you, that though she's pregnant, I'm telling you for a fact, Elio will tell you that she's going to miscarry. So Eliyahu decided and told you clearly that this woman is a bas chalitza, mila bas chalitza b'yibam. Isn't she a person that you're supposed to do chalitza and yibam? So therefore, you did it while she's pregnant. Hashtaname tigoli misel lamafreya. It turns out it was revealed backwards. Now we know in hindsight that she was supposed to do chalitza and yibam. So the chalitza you did back then is kosher. You don't say that we think about it backwards. It has to be a kosher chalitza right now. And therefore, you have to know it's kosher right now. And therefore, Rish Lakish says the fact that you did it while she's pregnant, even though she miscarried, you have to redo it again. And I can tell you that Rabbi Yochanan and Rabbi Shlokish are arguing on the definition of the pasuk. Rabbi Yochanan says, "Ubein ein lo." When you give chalitza, make sure that the dead husband did not have any children. Amar Rachmana. And it turns out when she miscarried, he didn't have any children. So the chalitza is a good chalitza. Rish Lakish ubein ein lo means ayin olav. You have to examine it at this moment right now. Can you say for certain that she has no child? Well, if she's pregnant, you can't say for certain because maybe she'll give birth to a normal child. Therefore, Rish Lakish says you have to redo the chalitza. So that brings it up to our Mishnah. Eisvei Rabbi Yochanan Rish Lakish. Rabbi Yochanan asked Rish Lakish a clear question from our Mishnah. Our Mishnah said, "Ein avlat shel kiyama." You gave a chalitza and the child did not survive, right? It miscarried. Who asur b'krova? So he asur b'krova psula b'nikuna. The Mishnah seems to treat it like a normal chalitza. So Bishlam the way I said it, that it's a normal chalitza, I mean a chalitza mubar shema chalitza. When you give a chalitza to a pregnant woman, that's called a chalitza mishim hachib psala. That's why it's a puzzle. That's why you puzzled her from kuna, because you gave her a normal chalitza. According to you, how do you read our Mishnah? When you give a chalitza to a pregnant woman, right, and it's not good chalitza, you have to redo it again. Why does our Mishnah say that she becomes invalid for Kohen and he's not permitted in her relatives and hers and his? Answers the Gemara, Rish Lakish will hold you do have to redo the chalitza. It's a pasala chalitza. But what the Mishnah says, our Mishnah is teaching you midrabanan that you treat it as if it was a kosher chalitza, and she's puzzled from kahuna. But nevertheless, our Mishnah, according to Rish Lakish, would hold that we have to redo the chalitza. Ika de Amrei, there's another version of who asked the question. First, we said Rabbi Yochanan asked against Rish Lakish. The other version learns, Eis Rish Lakish Rabbi Yochanan. Ein havlat shel kiyama. If the child does not survive, who asur b'krova, he's not permitted in her. So he asur b'krova. Same case. The chalitza, you gave a chalitza when she's pregnant and the child did not survive. Upsalam in a kuna. So Rish Lakish says like this. This Mishnah makes more sense according to me. According to me, that a chalitza at pregnancy is not considered good chalitza. The Mishnah says you puzzle from kahuna because the Mishnah is telling you it's a puzzle chalitza, but l'chumra you should treat it as if for stringency you treat it as if it's a kosher chalitza. But the Mishnah does not say she doesn't need to redo the chalitza. But according to you, that it's a kosher chalitza, why doesn't our Mishnah say why doesn't our Mishnah say that you have to redo the chalitza? Right? The Mishnah should tell you a big chiddush that you did it while she's pregnant, and yet you don't need you have to redo the chalitza from the brothers. So how's Rabbi Yochanan going to answer our Mishnah? He's going to say like this, I agree with you. Since the first the part of the Mishnah said that if you gave a chalitza to a woman, right, and she turned out she had a child, so your chalitza was nonsense, you didn't passel her, Tana Sefer Psala. That's why in the end of the Mishnah it says the word Psala. But really the Mishnah should have added that you don't, that the chiddush is that you don't need a new chalitza. So that it tries to align the Mishnah with the same word of light psala and psala. Eisvei, final kasha of the part of the Mishnah that talks about not that you did chalitza mu'uberes, but our Mishnah talks about a bia mu'uberes. Eisvei Rabbi Yochanan Rish Lakish. Our Mishnah said that if you had bia with the yavama, if the yavam had bia with the yavama while she's pregnant, ein avlad shel kiyama, if she miscarried, you could keep this woman. So Bishlam Lidi, so Rabbi Yochanan says, my sense, perfect sense, you can keep the woman, Damina, Chalitza Mubar Shma Chalitza. When you do Chalitza on a pregnant woman, it's a kosher Chalitza. Ubias Mubar Shma Bia, and having relations with a pregnant woman, with the pregnant Yavama, it's good Bia, it's a good Yibam. Mishim Hachik Tani Yakayim. The Mishnah says you can keep this woman. According to you, the Amrit Chalitzas Mubaris, Loishma Chalitza Bias Mubaris, Loishma Bia, according to you, it doesn't work. So our Mishnah should say, Yachsov Yibel V'Yakayim Boyole. Our Mishnah should say that you have to redo it again. The Mishnah should say you have to have Bia again, not just to say you can keep this woman and that's it. So the Gemara answers, Ma Yakayim, what does mean Yakayim? Yachsor V'Yibel V'Yakayim. Yakayim means you have to do Bia again and keep her. The Loisagi, you can't have it any other way. And this is a fantastic thing that Rashi says. According to Rish Lakish, when you did Bia with this woman, right? So you didn't do a kosher Bia, because only later you found out that she miscarried and then now she was worthy for Yibam. So the Bia that you did the first time already tells you that you can't do Chalitza. You can't do Chalitza, but you can't give get also because you would never marry her. So even if you decide not to keep her, they will force you to have Bia again because there's no other way out of this situation. You'll have to have Bia again, and then you can decide if you want to give her a get like a regular wife. But there's no other way around this. So that's the way Rish Lakish is going to learn Pshat in the Mishnah. And one more thing, Ika de Amri, others say that the version was not Rabbi Yochanan asked Rish Lakish asked Rabbi Yochanan. Eser Rish Lakish Rabbi Yochanan. Ein avlad shekol yama kayam. That if the vlad does not survive after the Bia, if you did Bia, the oven was miyabim, and the child did not survive, you could keep the child. You could keep the marriage. Because the word Yakayim means you could keep her, means Yachzer, the Yibel Yakayim. You have to do Bia again. It's not enough. According to you, she's a fully married woman. You don't, according to Rabbi Yochanan, you don't have to do Bia again. So then, when we find out that she had a normal child, right? It turns out that you did a good Yibam over here. So what the Mishnah should say, instead of the word Yakayim, keep her, the Mishnah should give you a choice. Ratza, if you want, Yoitzi, you can give her a get and divorce her. Ratza, Yakayim, you can keep her Mabayle. The Mishnah should give you a choice. Why does it just say you have to keep her? The Mishnah, you're right. The Mishnah should give you a choice, but I did on a ratio. Yoitzi, since it used the word Yoitzi, you have to divorce her. If it turns out she had a normal child, that means you're living in sin, you have to divorce her. Tananam is Sefer Yakayim. So the Sefer says that you could keep her, but it doesn't mean you could keep her. You have a choice if you want to keep her or to divorce her. But according to Rish Lakish, Yakayim means since you didn't do Bia the right way the first time, you have to Yakayim means you can only Yakayim, you can only do Bia again. So we have a fundamental machlokes in how to learn Pshat in the Mishnah about Choylitz Lumu Baris. You give Chalitza, and you weren't supposed to. You see she's pregnant. Is it a good Chalitza or Yibam or not? It's machlokes. Okay. We'll continue with this discussion Be'ezras Hashem tomorrow.
Fantastic.